Can you hear through it now?
Oh, yeah. Oh, actually, I can hear you very
You
clearly.
can hear. You need the light off. You'll be able to hear that. If your light's on, you can't hear.
So right now, you could hear it.
I can cut them off.
Take care of myself. Wait a minute, where are we?
No, no. I think that might be new business. I think that's, good energy. Yeah, good energy. All right. Feel better now? I want to say supposed to be. No, I think Rich said he was going to be here.
He's supposed to be here.
Yeah. Okay. Are we good?
Yeah.
No? Okay. He might be walking right now. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Tuesday rendition of the Portsmouth Town Council meeting. Sorry, I'm just having fun. Before we begin, if we could all stand for a pledge of allegiance and a moment of silence for our men and women serving in harm's way. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. Before we begin, I just want to do the emergency evacuation procedures. In the event of an emergency, there are two doors on your left, another door at the front of council chambers. We would exit the building, cross Middle Road, and meet at the school administration building and wait for further instruction. Tonight, we are live streaming via Zoom. So those of you participating remotely, there's an icon on your screen that would indicate you have a question. If you're calling in, *9 will indicate to the host you have a question. *6 will allow you to unmute your phone. If you're participating remotely or in person tonight, please state your name and address for the town clerk. And with that, we will begin with, well, I was going to do roll call. Wow, we haven't done it.
Ms. Abbott?
Here.
Mr. Gleason?
Here.
Mr. Hamilton?
Here.
Mr. Levesque?
Yeah.
Mr. Payette?
Here.
Mr. Aguirre?
Here. Okay, do President's executive summary. Before our regular meeting tonight, we did have an executive session. There were 3 items, 2 items under Rhode Island General Law 42, 46, 5A2, sessions pertaining to collective bargaining or litigation, or work sessions pertaining to collective bargaining or litigation. One was for the police and one was for the PMEA. We also had under Rhode Island General Law 42, 46, 5A1 personnel. It was general discussion on the town administrator's review. No votes were taken on any of the items in executive session. We will move on to our consent agenda.
Mr. President, I move that we approve as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next, we have our tax voucher. Nope,
Minutes.
I'm sorry, minutes. I flipped the page too quick. Minutes from our September 23rd meeting.
Mr. President, I just have one change I'd like to make, if I may.
Absolutely.
On page 3, in our discussion about with the public hearing about the zoning changes, I left a note with Ms. Hitchens. I don't know if it's thought. There is a line here. It says, Mr. Gleason asked Ms. Hitchens to verify that an ADU can't be used as a short-term rental. And to me, it should be followed by Ms. Hitchens agreed you can't use an ADU as an STR. Is that a fair statement, what the discussion was, or Yeah.
I'll listen to it and put.
if
what-
you would just make that changes, I would propose that we approve these minutes with the change.
Second.
One comment, if in fact the minutes don't, the actual tape does not verify that, then that amendment should not be.
I would agree.
Okay.
So we have a motion and a second.
Or should we just put them off to the next meeting?
We-
Until they're verified.
We could do that.
Just
Doesn't matter to me, either way.
We'll just table the minutes until our next meeting.
That would make more sense, so we confirm it.
Motion to table minutes?
Second,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you.
Now, let me flip the page. Tax voucher. It's a request approval for tax voucher 2024 1015-01.
Mr. President, I move that all three tax vouchers be approved as presented.
Well, there's only one.
There's only
There's
one.
only one.
I just elaborated, sorry.
Motion to approve the tax vouchers. Second.
Second,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next, it's our town administrators report.
that's all.
Mr. Rayner.
Again, Mr. President, Town Council, ladies and gentlemen. Again, I put this out last meeting, I'll put it out again, the Rhode Island Energy Facility Siting Board will hold a public meeting in Town Hall here in the chamber on October 23rd. That meeting will be from 5 to 9 p.m. And Rhode Island Energy will brief the EFSB on the mainline transmission project to Aquidneck Island from Tiverton. After the presentation of the project, followed by questions from the EFSB, the public will be allowed to make comment. A reminder that early voting for the statewide general election will begin tomorrow here in Town Hall in the chamber and will end at 4 p.m. on Monday, November 4th, the day before the general election on November 5th. Also a reminder that the public hearing on the proposed curbside single hauler ordinance will be held at 7 p.m. on November 12th at the Portsmouth Middle School. Additionally, I was asked to make a comment regarding the transfer station. The transfer station will continue to operate and is not closing. Last January, the council committed to the continued operation of the transfer station in addition to the implementation of a curbside collection program, and directed that an RFP be issued to continue the transfer station operation after the expiration of the current contract. The current contract for the operation of the Headley Street transfer station expires June 30th. And we advertised an RFP in September for the continued operation of the transfer station. That contract will begin July 1st. We will present the bid responses for council approval at the next meeting, and we will be prepared to present the proposed transfer station and curbside sticker prices starting July 1st, 2025 at the first meeting in December. With respect to the website, I've stated that the website is up and running. The new town website mobile app has been finished and is now available for download. So anybody that's interested, you can download the Portsmouth town website app. It's available wherever you get your apps, Apple, the Apple Store, or the Android Store, or the Google Store. And lastly, unfortunately, the Rhode Island State Police had an issue with the system that is used for cybersecurity training, and the records for this month's required training were lost. So for those of you that completed the October assignment before October 8th, unfortunately, you got to do it again. Okay. If you didn't do it, you still got 2 weeks. We got your name, sir.
Yeah.
Mr. President, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner. We are going to move on to resignations and appointments. First item under resignations from the Melville Park Committee. It's Mr. Jeff Richard.
Move to accept with regret.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next, we have the Prudence Island Planning Commission, Ms. Irene St. Germain.
Again, move to accept with regret.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. And then we have appointments. It's a reappointment to the Conservation Commission for Ms. Connie Harding.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you. Moving on, old business, first item, it's the Portsmouth Community Electricity Winter Prices. And I believe we have, she's up there.
She wasn't there.
Oh.
She's waving.
All right.
Can you guys see me and hear me? Okay.
Hold
A
on,
moment.
we can see you. Now we got you.
Okay, great. Thank you for having me this evening. Yep, so this is just a quick update as to the new pricing for the Portsmouth Community Electricity Program now that we're about to enter the winter pricing. So that pricing is going to go into effect on November 1st. And I do believe there's a couple of slides that you guys should have with the new pricing. I'm not sure, sorry, if that's up on the screen or if I needed to share that myself.
Just give us 1 second. We're pulling up the pricing. Now, can she see the screen as well?
See the screen as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Great, yeah, so we are gonna be for the standard rate, which is what the vast majority of Portsmouth residents are on. We're coming in at a 10% below the Rhode Island last resort rate, which is pretty much in par with where we land as these prices change every 6 months. So definitely happy that we're still underneath that last resort service. And just an update on the performance of the program. So since May 2023, when the program launched, in total, Portsmouth residents have saved about $355,000. And that's averaging out to about $55 per average residential customer. And then additionally, the environmental impact of the program has been pretty good as well. Annually, you're buying about 3,500 megawatt hours of additional renewable energy. So that's on top of what Rhode Island would be requiring. And that is going to equate to a reduction of over 2 million pounds of carbon dioxide emissions each year, which if you want to put that in terms of cars, it's taking about 440 vehicles off the road for a year. So no small impact, pretty good. Definitely some good impact both on the environmental impact as well as the savings. Of course, we do have to say the savings can't be guaranteed just with the changing nature of last resort service. But the goal always is, to come in below that last resort service. So that pricing will go into effect on November 1st, and residents don't need to take any action. They will automatically receive the new pricing for the product that they're in.
Can I ask you a quick question? In the
Yep.
past, can we go back to the rates, please, Kathy? Thank you. In the past, the basic rate has been lower than the standard rate. Are those two slides backwards? Are those two numbers transposed? Because the basic rate has no renewable energy. In the past, the renewable energy rate of the standard Portsmouth product was always a little more than the basic rate.
Yeah, they might be transposed wrong. Sorry, I'm not looking at the exact same thing as you, I think. Let me just pull it up.
The basic rate is 16.044 and the standard rate is 16.287. Just look at your own page, I guess.
Yeah. The basic rate is 17.430.
Should be,
And
should
then-
have 16.287.
Okay, let me see.
And since that's what it says on my screen, that's what we're holding you to.
Yeah.
but I think.
Just make sure I have the right numbers here.
Yeah, the basic rate does not include renewable sources, so it's reversed down here. So what's labeled here as the Portsmouth Basic should be labeled the Portsmouth Standard and vice versa.
Well, no, just the numbers are reflect. The numbers are different. So the basic rate is 16,044. Yep. The standard rate is 16,287.
Correct.
Both of which are below the last resort.
Yes, correct.
Okay, that's good news.
No, it's very good news, but I am kind of curious if there is a short answer to this question. Why is the resorting to renewables so much more expensive? Is there an answer to that?
Sorry,
I have 19, go ahead.
sorry, no, my computer just broke up for a second. Can you just repeat your question?
The Portsmouth 100, that is, you're getting 100% renewable, is 19.327. The no additional renewal, the Portsmouth standard is 16.044 cents. So it's like over 3 cents different per kilowatt hour.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, I guess just when they were procuring for this rate period, the markets weren't as favorable. And the way that they procure, they kind of buy in batches when the market is supposed to be doing better. So sometimes those additional renewables can really vary from what the base rate is. And that just happened to be the case this time with the 100%.
Any further questions from councilors? No. Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you. Are we gonna switch back to it? We're just cleaning up the screen here.
Yeah, of course. I know. I feel like 4 years into this, I should know how to use Zoom. Still figuring it out every time. But thank you for your time. And Rich has my contact. If you guys have any other questions, you can get them to him. You can get them to me as well.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. All right, the next item, it's under new business. And this was, says possibility for a policy and or ordinance to require any substantial changes to a voter approved bond be publicly disclosed and discussed before changes are made. This was put on the agenda by a resident that Mr. Grebe had submitted some questions back in, I believe it was September timeframe. And we had asked to get our bond counsel to come before us and provide answers to the questions. So at this point, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Mr. Rayner,
Thank you. He's our bond advisor.
bond advisor. Sorry.
So we've invited Steve Mastroeni from PFM, who is our bond advisor, to perhaps walk through. He's prepared a brief and he can walk through how this bond was structured and hopefully answer some of the questions that were raised.
Thank you.
Good evening. Do you have the presentation?
Yeah, I was gonna pull it up.
Okay, great, thank you.
That's the other. What's the next item?
Great, thank you. Again, my name is Steve Masseroni from PFM. I'm a director out of PFM's Boston office, and I work with local cities and towns in New England, including 22 in Rhode Island. So if you turn to page 3, I'll be brief. This first page is just a bond summary, information we already know. General Assembly passed the school bonds back in 2020 in an amount of $21.4 million. The Bond Act further had language that if the town received any grants, the bond would be reduced by those grants. The town did receive approximately $1.6 million from RIDE for PAYGO funding grant. The legislation authorizes up to a term of 30 years and up to a period of 3 years of interest only. The bonds must be issued through the state conduit, Rhode Island Health and Ed, in order to be eligible for both principal and interest reimbursement. And the town's minimum share ratio, as folks know, is 35%, and the expectation is for 5 bonus points. Turn to the next page. The bonds were sold in the amount of $19,510,000 by Rybeck on June 28, 2022. The bonds are issued as fixed-rate bonds with an all-in true interest cost of 3.52%, which includes all fees and expenses. These are fixed-rate bonds. No Rhode Island cities and towns, with the exception of Providence, can issue variable rate bonds. These are fixed rate. The yield on the bonds range anywhere from 2%, 2.04 up to 3.88. They're sold as serial bonds, which are common in the marketplace. The bond term was 23 years, and the bond has 3 years of interest only. I will note that the term and interest rate, interest-only period were extended by 1 year due to some concerns with the expected substantial completion of the project and the potential delay in the receipt of state aid. So there was a decision made to push it out 1 year. Given everything that was going on in the marketplace as far as supply chain issues and a fair amount of school projects going on, there was a decision by the school department to push it out 1 year. Doesn't hurt you. You don't lose state aid. It just accrues and it gets paid upon substantial completion. At the time, it was expected and is still expected that the interest earnings on the project would offset the inclusion of capitalized interest and the costs associated with the 1 year amortization delay. And just note that the capitalized interest covered interest for 2023. If that interest was not capitalized, it would have been in the operating budget anyway. Slide 5 just gives a brief comparison. So on the left, the projections that I provided to this council back in, I think it was June of 2021, had a bond issue of approximately $19,840,000. We expected 40% state aid. We had used an estimated interest rate of 3.5%. We had an expected issuance date of March of 22 and expected final maturity of 2044. And the projected debt service was approximately $29 million, and expected state aid of approximately $11.235 million for a total cost of $17.805. And I got to tell you the truth, the thing that always concerns me when we give these projections is the interest rate. No one has a crystal ball. We do it off an index based on historical average, but you can see if you look at the right-hand column, kind of hit the nail on the head and got a little bit lucky. The rate did come in at 3.52. We issued $19,510,000 of bonds, same expected share ratio of 40%. We did issue these bonds 3 months later than expected initially, and we did, as I noted, push the principal final maturity out 1 year. Total debt service is $30.9 million. Off that $30.9 million is the capitalized interest for $717,000, which brings it down to $30.237. Expected aid's a bit lower. This number is still going to move around. Once the project is substantially complete, we'll know what that number is, as well as the projected investment income of $1.5 million. That we did not include in the projections for a few reasons. Number one, it provides some cushion. Number two, there's no guarantees that we'll earn interest. And number three, at the time this bond was sold, it was actually favorable to the town. They got a very good rate of 3.52. And what happened, as most folks know, after we sold the bonds, short-term rates started to creep up. Yield curve is flat and inverted. And what I would say is that the town benefited from what we call no negative carry on the bond proceeds. Bond proceeds are sitting in an account during this 2-year period. They're earning interest up to that ARB yield of a 3.50. So it's not costing you any money if the project's delayed. The money is earning some interest. I want to note a couple other things. It was mentioned in the correspondence about bond premium. The bonds were sold with premium, common in the marketplace. Investors in a low interest rate environment are willing to give more money or premium in order to receive more fixed income down the road. As an issuer, the town, you're indifferent. This is market driven, it's investor driven. If an investor wants premium, you give them the premium. As a result, you issue less bonds. So it offsets. Higher the premium, the lower your par amount of your bond. So really indifferent to that. I think that's what I have. Happy to answer questions. The other note, just a couple other things I just want to know. Investment earnings, we got that as of October 2nd. That number will continue to grow a little bit. I will caution you that the town will have to do what's called an arbitrage rebate report prior to the completion of the project. There could be some money that's due back to government. It's called positive arbitrage, which is not a bad thing. So the IRS lets you basically invest the proceeds of the bonds up to the yield on the bond, which is 350. While at the beginning, you were a little bit below the 350. Over the past year or so, you've been a bit above the 350. So once you have a calculation done, those earnings can now be transferred to the debt service fund once the project's complete and start to be applied off debt service. So again, that's a good thing that you maximize your opportunity with the reinvest of the proceeds. And I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Steve. So, I mean, I think the questions were really, some of the questions came from a resident. You did see those questions.
I did.
I'm not sure what the easiest way to handle this is. Mr. Grebe, you're here. These were your questions. Do you have any further questions or thoughts? Okay, so based on the information that you provided, though, did these answer your questions? You're gonna have to come up. Thank you.
Tom Grebe, 110 Thayer Drive. My agenda item, as I put in, was discussion and action about a policy, resolution, or ordinance about changing a bond after it was voted upon. That's what I did have some questions within that, I will agree with you, but my submission clearly stated that my interest was in discussing an ordinance that prevented major changes without coming back to the council and publicly reviewing what was being changed. Not that you couldn't change it, but that it would be done in public. That was what my, and I believe my letter clearly stated that. I've got a little presentation, not long.
So I guess the question comes down to what is the term major changes? Because, I mean, the bond principal you had stated was 19,840,000. We were actually lower at 19,510,000. Or is that, I'm sorry, if we went back to the numbers. I can't switch screens. I guess, the summary chart. Yeah, I mean, I'm going, but Mr. Grebe, your comment was, so we actually we bonded less money, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so we bonded slightly less money. You felt that there was a variable interest rate. We're basically saying that it's a fixed interest bond.
That's something that I want to question because I honestly don't understand it. The document that PFM provided for our debt service that's on the town website has what I would call a variable interest rate. Now, I'm not sure what PFM thinks of a variable. I think of it as a number of changes in the interest rate that are fixed. It's not an adjustable rate, which would be off of an index. So just looking at what PFM provided, the interest rate in 2000, and again, they don't do it until 2006. The interest rate is 5%. That's their number, and it stays at 5% until 2035, and then it drops down to 3.2%, 3.37% on up to 3.875%. To me, that's a variable rate, and that's what PFM provided, and it's what's shown on the town website. So I don't understand what's going on.
Okay. Steve's here.
Do any of you? I mean,
Well, I think, and no, I'm not gonna claim to be the expert here, but that's why we have Steve here,
This
to
is
help us
your-
through this.
I know exactly
But-
what it is.
But at the, if what was presented to the
Yeah,
town
June.
in June are the numbers on the left, which show basically at the end, $17,805,891. And now we hear in October, the projection, it's less, right?
Correct,
So,
yeah.
so in general, we're in a better position now than what was initially. I'm asking Steve. I'm asking Steve. Well, it's my meeting at the moment.
So, I'll answer your questions and
Yeah.
I'll certainly answer your questions. Yeah, I mean, based on the projections, it's right in line with what was projected. It's not finalized yet, but, understanding when you come before, you're doing a bond in 2021, you make certain assumptions. And you hope that plan of finance stays intact through the whole plan, through the whole construction period. Sometimes that doesn't happen. I would argue that, to me, the one change that I think folks were aware of is the fact that we had to capitalize that first year's interest. And that was a $700,000 difference. Other than that, the fact that we went out 1 year further is not a significant change at all. So all in all, I think the plan of finance came in pretty close to what we had projected. As far as the way bonds is sold, I mean, I can go into bonds 101 and talk all night.
Please
Rich
don't.
knows this.
We're not
But,
going to do
yeah,
that.
but that's how bonds are sold. Just think about,
Yeah.
when you buy a 20-year bond, you can buy anywhere on the yield curve, similar to when you buy a CD. When you buy a CD, you can buy a 6-month CD, a 1-year, a 2-year, a 5-year. And generally, in a normal sloping rate environment, which we're not, it's a little inverted right now, the longer you go out on the curve, the higher the interest rate. So if you look, I noted that the yields on the bonds went from a 2 point, I'll tell you exactly what it was. I think it was like the low 2% to high, to the low 4%. The longer you go out, the more interest you get. So it's any treasuries, everything is priced the same. These bonds were sold the same way that the town has sold bonds as long as I've been doing it here for 20 years. Police station bonds had the same structure. If you go on in the book and you look at the police station bonds, same way. If you look at any of the other Ryback bonds, that's how bonds are sold. They're sold in serial maturities from 1 year through 20 or 1 year through 25. The bonds are fixed rate. There's no risk. When you talk about variable rate is, you alluded to it, that the rate could potentially change. When you say variable rate, that means that the rate could potentially change and the town could be subject to higher interest rates if rates go up. You're not. You have no risk on these bonds. These bonds are locked in. Your total cost was at $352, including all fees and expenses. It's locked. It will be locked in till the maturity date, and there's no risk of a change in the rate. Now, for presentation purposes, the reason why folks like myself use one blended rate and we do it off an index is so it we don't have to have this discussion about interest rates, yield curve, and things like that. But the reality is, when you do projections, you can project off one rate, which is off an index. That at the time was a 20-year rate that we were using for a projection, and we had a little cushion in there, thankfully so. But that's how we do our projections.
So then, Mr. Mastroianni, do you feel there was any substantial change then between what you presented to us back in 21 and where we currently are?
In my opinion, there wasn't a substantial change. The reason why I noted in the first page of my slide is that the legislation is fairly broad. The legislation authorizes you to issue up to 30 years. They authorize you to have up to 5 years of interest only. Now, if if Rich said, hey, we want to go from a 22-year bond to a 30-year bond, yeah, I would say that's substantial, and we should go back to the voters or back to the council just to note that. It's fully within the legislation. But if you look at the data, it wasn't even a full year. It was 9 months that we moved out the principal. It was only 9 months because we were 3 months later when we issued the bonds. Again, the only thing I will note is the capitalized interest, again, was an 11th hour inclusion in the bond because it was not budgeted. So, and again, the expectation which held true is that the earnings, which we didn't include, would more than offset that 700,000, which, as it turns out, it did.
Okay, so thank you, Steve.
Yeah,
Mr.
can I
Levesque.
just, so you go out 2020 for a project that may be done in 2023. Fair assumption there's going to be changes
Absolutely.
in the world. When the person buys the bond, they are looking at the authorization and they're looking at your numbers. Is that a fair statement?
No, when a investor buys a bond, they're looking at you. They're looking at the town. They're looking at the creditworthiness of the town. Community in Rhode Island at AAA.
All right, if anything was going to impact the marketability of that bond, whose responsibility would that be to come back to the town and say there's a risk here?
I don't know if there would be risks to the, I mean, there certainly could be risks to the town. What I would have envisioned in some situations, if there's something going on in the marketplace where, we have another pandemic or a credit crisis like we did in 08, where interest rates spike up. Certainly that would be a situation where if we're projecting 3.5% interest rate and now we're at 5.5%, I think that's something that, we would recommend that you bring back to the town before you go
Who
forward.
would
with
make
that.
the decision as to whether or not something was at variance from what the voters approved to what in fact is going out?
Yeah, good question. So your bond counsel who's not here, Ellen Corno, has to give an opinion. Her opinion basically says that the bond fits within the legislation and approvals of the council.
And that is what, a purchaser would look at that.
Yes, the
assurance.
tax exempt opinion, correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in other words, if changes occurred, the attorney who has actually the malpractice coverage and the experience would be obligated to come back and say, this is now a risk. And
Correct.
advise the
Correct.
council that they either have to pull in or they have to somehow change what they're doing.
That's a fair statement. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Levesque. Any further questions from counselors? Comments? So, Mr. Grieb, I guess the question is, a substantial change.
All right, let me tell you my definition of a substantial change. A substantial change is anything over and above the market interest rate fluctuations, changing term, those sorts of things, principal repayment. Again, while we're saying this was not a substantial change, or we heard that, when you look at the numbers, and you can see them right here, total debt service. I don't want to talk about capitalized interest or the interest income, because from what I heard, the interest income is really on both, but we didn't put it on the first one. Capitalized income, or interest rather, that interest was paid to the bondholder. That interest was paid to the bondholder by Portsmouth. The only thing that did is it put that cost or that expense in a different accounting bucket. The total cost of this bond went up by $2 million. That's a substantial change. And I take exception to the fact that this wasn't budgeted. Right here in what PFM did and showed for the bond vote shows interest being paid. It wasn't 717, it was not $694,000 in 23. That was the plan. It's not like all of a sudden we had a problem, we were going to pay the interest. That was the plan. That's a substantial change.
Question. So if in fact it had been more favorable situation of the price of items went down, the availability of funding went up, we had lesser interest rates, and in fact that accrued to the benefit of the people who made the fundamental decision that they wanted to go ahead and do something, an activity, a capital purchase, okay? Are we to stop just because everything turned out to be our benefit?
Absolutely not. And that's not what I'm
Okay.
saying.
Now,
What I'm
you're
saying,
saying-
that you can come
Can
back to
I
the
continue
council in
my
no
thought?
time.
You're
You
saying-
asked me a question, please let me answer. All right. The ability of someone to do this quickly should still be there. It's going back to the council. We're not going back to a vote. We're going back to the council and saying, look, this bond, we're going to have to push it out a year. And we're going to go for a premium on it to get a little bit more money, which, by the way, blows you out of what you're supposed to be, but under the law. But nonetheless, those are major changes. They should come back to the council. That could be done like that. You could have, if it was necessary, an emergency meeting, approve it, and go ahead, if that's what you want to do. But at least everybody would know. My problem in this is less with the change that was done, but the fact that nobody knew. When I brought this up at the
Green,
budget
if
meeting,
you're going to go into I mean, I have questions about what you've said already.
please.
You're just going, okay, one, you have a statement here, the budget changes provided 1 million more cash to Portsmouth than the projected. Okay, where is that cash now? Are you satisfied where the cash is now, or do you still allege that
Nobody's told me.
cash? was-
That's not an answer that was told, and I doubt it's an answer.
Okay, so you're not
that Mr.
satisfied
Matroni
with
can
Now,
can-
we have everything all set to go out on bond. Everybody's all set, but there is a change, and you're not saying how much of a change, a change.
What I'm
And
saying,
then each
what,
instance-
no, let me
No,
make sure.
I am talking now.
Okay, gentlemen, this is,
Oh, Mr. Creed, you say, oh, don't interrupt me when I'm talking. Now I'm talking and you're interrupting.
I know, let's just, I guess what I want to get to the point here is I don't want to spend all night trying to go through some of these items if the issue becomes if there was a substantial change. You know, I don't recall the whole process, when this was going on. We did go through numbers back in 21. I guess, you know, from my perspective, I don't know if that would have triggered substantial change. I don't know. I don't have that answer tonight.
And again, my substantial change was not from the start. My substantial change is from what voted on the bond. This bond total, and it's right on PFM's screen here. Total debt service is $2 million more for this bond than was projected. That's a substantial change. That was after the vote. It was between the vote and when the bonds were sold. So you've got what's there, maybe a 6-month timeframe that I'm talking about. And if you're looking for a definition of a substantial change, I would say any change, and you can make it up, but any change that was greater than the normal bond fluctuation, bond interest rate fluctuation in that time frame.
I don't want, I mean, we've already spent about 25 minutes on this.
I think it's
Alright.
more about a future moving forward.
And
I don't-
the
we're not-
thing about
we're
it
not doing
is,
any-
yes, people have been
eh,
questioning the bonding of the town of Portsmouth. All right, it has become a cause celebrate. There is a problem, however. There is a whole structure. Every town, every state, every community has to deal with how you go out and make your request for a bond, what you do after the request is approved, hopefully, if it's not approved, okay? And then it goes to the financial people and bond counsel, and they draft up all the agreements, okay? The only issue the town really has is it marketable? Can it be sold? Can the object of our desires be done within the framework of the legislation? You want to say that we should be coming back, delaying things. Say the market's going crazy and we're delaying things and it's going to cost us more. And they're sitting there saying, by the way, it's going to cost you an extra, 0.25% of a point. Oh, wait a second, it's going to cost you a quarter now. No, all right, you go forward. I cannot see anything on a substantial change here. I don't know where you're getting your $2 million figure, although we do have $1 million that I believe council
It's,
indicated.
it's,
Mr. Grieve,
it's,
go back to the podium, please.
it's okay. It's okay for now.
Okay.
Mr. Grebe, we do see that. Right.
Over 23 years, and we have $1 million that is sitting there to help pay that off. We're getting interest on it, okay? That's the money that disappeared, all right? That is separated. We're getting interest on it. And there's a fluctuation over 23 years on a bond or a purchase of this size. You're probably going to end up with that type. It's like what? You said, what, 2 million? It's like 100,000 a year?
100,000 a year.
But
Maybe that doesn't mean anything to you, but
It
it
means
should.
plenty to me, Mr. Grebe, but it's not correct. The council is, the financial advisor is sitting there. And again, I don't really need to have any more, I personally don't need to have any more of your conversation.
okay, all right,
And I'm not yelling about it.
okay, okay. We're not. Let's.
No, I am not.
Do we have comments from counselors? Any further? Steve, would you like to?
I just want to point out one thing. At the end of the day, what it comes down to is net debt service versus net debt service and the tax rate impact. Every community I go out to, when you want to issue a bond, say, what will the tax rate impact be on my residents? If you look at that screen, it's going to show that there's no change from what was projected in 2021 and where it is today on the tax rate impact. Granted, there were 2 changes in the plan of finance, but they didn't impact the residents on the tax rate.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Okay, so I guess the question from the council is, are we going to take any action, table, the possibility of an ordinance?
So I think the first thing we have to do is realize that hopefully in the future, we're not going to have $20 million bonds to fix schools and other things. But we can be a little bit more transparent in the fact of how it was funded. A lot of that was handled through the school department and previous finance directors. And I think that is potentially where some of the ball got dropped. The fact that we're making an extra $1.6 million in roughly $1.6 million in projected income, which is probably going to be a little bit more because we still have one of the largest projects still to finish, which is the bathrooms at the middle school, which is about $2 million. And we haven't fully paid everything out. I'll find out more tomorrow, but as Steve mentioned, the effects of these swings haven't changed our tax rate or caused our tax rate to go up much more. The reality is we can do better, we should do better. I don't think there's a cause for an ordinance or a policy, more than guidance of future councils and future administrations that, hey, if we have a hiccup to this extent, which the biggest hiccup is that 717,290 and the capitalized interest that was supposed to be budgetized and wasn't. I don't think we need an ordinance. I think we just need better policy decisions throughout the organization.
Mr. President, can I?
Sure.
One, I don't think there were mistakes made. I don't like blaming the school department. I don't like blaming a prior administration. And here's the problem you run into. Oftentimes, bond issues are not voted unanimously. There is a coterie of people who don't want to do it. And when you start saying, oh, by the way, we have a blip, all of those people will show up and start wondering what happened to the blip. And we're back at the high school, we're back at the middle school, people telling us that this is a substantial change because they don't want to do it in the first place. How many times do you think we would have had a senior center bond issue? And the school issue, yeah. By the way, you know, there's probably 30 or 40% of the people might have an interest in the school. A lot of people don't. So they be here every time we report a blip. I have no interest in doing, as long as we're solid, it's marketable, we're having no problems with our bond rating, everything is copacetic. You know, I do not want to give fodder to people who want to come in and re-argue a bond issue.
Okay, so I'd like to just circle back here with the item was really whether or not we need a policy or an ordinance. What's that? Oh, well, a policy or an ordinance for a substantial change. I would agree with Mr. Hamilton with the respect to moving forward. It's really up to the council, the administration, in looking at bonds to make sure that we're dotting the i's and crossing the t's. I don't think, there's any intent to fool the voters or anything like that. I think they do a good job in presenting the information. So I would agree that we do not need a policy or an ordinance. I think we just need to continue doing, our due diligence when we're going through the process. And that's really on all the parties. And that's where I'll leave it. If there are any further questions or comments from council, feel free. I'll get to you in a second, Mr. Morris.
I would just like to say, Mr. President, that I think that there needs to be a mechanism. It doesn't necessarily have to be an ordinance, which would probably be cumbersome in this case, but somehow if it's difficult when you see people after the fact saying, hey, we have a problem and nobody told us. And I think that that's what the biggest issue is. I don't know if you were ever informed that there was a problem or any councils were along this line.
There is no problem.
But I would just suspect that, that just needs to be passed on to the council. So there are no surprises. It's a communication thing to me. So there are no problems if there are solutions.
Can I make one last point? Bond issues are a very, I won't say delicate matter, but what you cannot do is come round back. When a person is going to buy the bond, and by the way, I hate bonded indebtedness. All right? It is one item we can't touch in our budget because we owe it and we can't go bankrupt and we would destroy our credit rating. But you don't play games with it. You listen to legal counsel, you listen to financial people, you don't play games with it because if you lose your marketability, then you're in trouble.
Mr. Fitzmaurice?
Thank you, Mr. President. Larry Fitzmaurice, 50 Kristen Court. Want to start by saying that we're not here to question the execution of this bond. I must say that so far, last time I knew, this bond was being executed well by the school department. Also, we don't think that this affects our bond rating as AAA, And we need to be careful about that. I don't think any of this affects it. But I also must say, I don't think that the members of council fully understood what was going on here. And one of the things that I will present as evidence is that Mr. Grebe and I have been studying this thing for 6 months. It took us 6 months to figure out most of the details in this thing. That's a lack of transparency by definition, because most of the people don't have our background and our willingness to look at all the fine print. But the price of this thing did go up. And it didn't go up because of market fluctuations. The interest rates were pretty basic. They didn't fluctuate much at all. The difference is that the internal interest rates in each year, there were 13 years in which there was above market interest rates on this thing. That's how we got the premium, in my opinion. But in any case, there was a different rate system in place when this thing was executed. And that was not transmitted to the membership of the voters that went to vote. In other words, the electors. And the electors are part of the risk assessment process here. And maybe we've kind of lost sight of that. We have experts, of course, and we use them on lots of things. In this case, we'd used two sets of experts, PFM and our bond counsel. So we have the voters in there in the voting booth. They're supposed to be making intelligent decisions. But if it takes educated voters 6 months to figure out how this bond works, then we got a problem. And if it's going to be another year longer than it was supposed to be, than it was advertised, that's a problem, because time is cost in any bond system.
Mr. President, can I just ask do you think people were inaccurate when they put out the bond request? That is what people voted on? Was there some sort of chicanery there?
No, actually, I don't think the council understood any of this.
So we put out the bond issue. Nobody understood what was going on, but they voted for it. That's your position.
What is the nobody you're talking about? The council or the people?
I'm saying that they voted on it, so you're saying that they didn't know and the council didn't know what they were voting on. Isn't that a fair statement of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so.
What's that?
I think so. But let me point out that
How
we're
many
not
bond issues
questioning.
Can we have that people will understand at the outset exactly what will happen over the period of time of that bond getting approved and the construction and everything like that? How many times will the voter go into that booth and know all of that, Mr. Fitzmaurice?
Well, obviously, much of what you listed is going to be future experience. None of us can see the future. So the
Well, I'm
answer,
pretty good at it.
that's an answer that I'll give you right
All
there.
right, let's.
If you're asking me, without speculation, I know what I understood to this thing, and I did not understand this was going to be $23 million. 23 years. And I didn't know we weren't going to be paying a principal in the first 3 years. I didn't know that either. If I'd have known that, I would have realized instantly that it was going to cost more.
And did you vote for it or against it?
That's,
None of your business.
that's okay. Let's.
The
yeah,
issue,
let's just
the
let
issue is
Mr.
not
Bruce finish.
whether the people voted on this to approve it or not. That's not in question. The people approved this. We're not here to question what the people did or decided to do. I presume the council feels the same way. When the people make this decision, it's done. We're not going back and changing any of this, ever. So I'm just saying that there's, a transparency problem. If we're to evaluate as voters the stability and the worthiness of this vote, this bond, we need to know some basic data. What the interest rate, an estimate, what the interest rate would be. And that was given, and it was fairly accurate. How long this thing is going to run? It was advertised as 22 years. It turned out to be 23 years. and, you know, and other things. So, you know, and again, there's 13 years of 5% interest rate in this thing.
No. I'm gonna stop because Steve has already said it's a 3.52% fixed interest rate.
So,
So it's 3.52 fixed interest rate.
but the data sheet says
Steve, can you
15
come back up?
years of over 5%.
Steve, can you come back up and explain that one more time so we can put this to bed?
No, that's not necessary.
Okay,
Well, it might
but
be.
he's already, he's already expressed that it's a 3.52% fixed interest rate, and you're representing that it's 5%. So I want to make sure that we're giving the right information out to the people in all honesty and transparency.
The rate is 3.5. It's called true interest costs. It's called all-in TIC, all-in true interest costs. It's the average of all the yields from year 1 through year 23. I just have to comment on a couple of things. If you vote for the state bond issues, you'll notice in the ad, they use a 4% interest rate. When they sell those bonds, it's going to be 0 bonds for 20 years. Same thing. When we've sold every bond for the town for the past 15 years, as I mentioned, the police station, same way we did projections, same way we sold the bonds. So, but the rate, to answer your question, Council President, the blended TIC, which is an industry standard, is 3.52%. I'm not disagreeing. There are some 5% coupons. And again, it gets back to my point. You sell bonds with a premium. As a result, you get 5% coupon in return for some premium. That's why the par amount of the bonds is below what the initial projection was, because we downsized because you got some premium from some investors.
Thank you, Steve.
So it is 5%. And I've got the document right here.
I know, but I guess the point is, at the end of the day, Mr. Fitzmaurice, at the end of the day, all in, it's on average, the 3.52. It was projected to be 3.5 all in. So I think, you know, if we're just comparing the lines that are up there, and at the end of the day, the net debt service to the town is more favorable in the long run.
All right, may I approach?
For what? To see, I don't need to see the 5% over a year 12. Okay. I understand that, but it's as they explained it, right? There's give and take. The average, right? The average all in is 3.52 is what he's telling us.
All right,
So in order to have an average, there's going to be some highs and there's going to be some lows. But the average all in is 3.52.
okay.
Fair statement? Okay.
I think that we're gonna have to agree to disagree.
We can agree to disagree. So I don't think we need an ordinance. I mean, all right. I'll let Mr. Fitzmaurice wrap it up.
And I will do so. I think I've made most of my points. Again, I will say that the voters deserve the opportunity to understand the true financial risks of the bonds that they're approving. And a number of those is going to be whether or not they're going to have to pay more for this bond than they anticipated. In the end, they will. And I sat down and I figured it out, and I used the 40% support from the state, and I ended up with $1,148,000 is what it's going to cost us, more than we should have should have expected. So, you know, I'm not saying council did anything underhanded here, because I don't actually believe any of you understood it. I certainly didn't, and it's a good chance that nobody in this room, maybe representative here did, but certainly most of us didn't understand this. And if these things are so complicated and nobody can figure them out, that is a problem. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, I'm going to move the table, but I want to make one quick statement. We are going to be bonding in the future. All of the questions that come into the mind will probably be present at that time. As far as I'm concerned, we've kind of slandered the whole process by the suggestion, we don't know what we're doing and the voters don't know what they're doing. Guess what? We've been doing this for all of my life in public service and my father's life in public service, okay? So we will build things and the people will know they want to build them.
All right. Any final comments, questions from counselors? So I don't really think any action is necessary unless someone wants to make a motion.
I'll do that.
Okay, then let us move on to our next item, which is clarification of the Prudence Island Transfer Station sticker period. I believe Mr. John is on.
Yeah, he's on, Kathy, do you have him? John's on Zoom. Oh, he was. There he is, yeah, he's under attendees. John, can you raise your hand? There we go.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having this on the agenda. I appreciate it. When the new term for the transfer station started, which was an 18-month term to get it so that it is consistent with the fiscal year. It was the first time that actually the full term of the transfer station agreement was specified on that agreement as January 1st to the end of June 30th. Prior to that, Prudence Islanders were of the belief that the term on Prudence Island was April 1st to March 31st, and that it had been that way forever. In talking to Rich, he was clear that 3 months, the first 3 months of the year, was in fact a grace period. A number of people on the island came to the Planning Commission and said, well, no, it's never been a grace period. No one ever said it was a grace period. And they asked me to follow up with the council. So the only thing I can say is that if you look at the forms over the years, there's never mention of grace period. It talks about the expiration being March 31st. And it talks about expiration being March 31st for a 1-year term. And I think that's what people have been going on. So that's the statement. The 3 months totals $64.17. That some people on Prudence Island believe they should be refunded because they paid it twice.
Okay. All right. Hold on a second, John.
Yep.
We have
A lot of sirens.
a lot of sirens going on, a lot of noise
Oh.
at the moment.
Not coming through on Zoom.
But we also have Mr. Woodhead here to give us a little bit of background. But I think this first change occurred back in 22, right? Some of the background, and I've as being on the liaison to the Planning Commission.
Yep.
I think a lot of it was referring back to it, in my opinion, being on the council, a lot of it was this grace period, so to speak.
Correct.
That was implied because of year-round residents were not, I'm sorry, there was a lot of seasonal residents. And so there was always a lag in purchasing stickers.
Correct.
But I believe and I've been on the council for several, I've been on the council for 10 years. In my opinion, the sticker's always been January 1. It's
Correct.
always a 1-year sticker beginning January 1.
So, Council President, members of the council, that's how we get the sticker prices for the year. We come to you in December to get the sticker prices for both Portsmouth and Prudence Island. And we give Portsmouth
a 1 month grace period and we give Prudence Island the 3 month grace period, I think there might have been a little bit miscommunication between us and Prudence about the grace period, but it's always been like that. And I think this is the first year that we told Prudence that, you know, it was from January, you only had a 1 month grace period and you had to, you know, we had to get stickers sold by February 1st. And I think that's where this whole transition came up with John and the Prudence Island Planning Commission. So, but once again, we've always done it. December 1st, we always set the sticker price and we always started selling stickers January 1st.
So it was specifically a grace period. People in,
Always.
at the Headley Street Station also got a grace period, but it was shorter, just till February 1st,
Right.
January 31st. And it was April 1st on Prudence because there's not a ton of year-round residents.
Right.
So it was given a little bit more time. The reality is that there really is, unfortunately, there is no rebate due to anybody.
Correct. We don't give rebates. We don't, the prorated rebates don't start until January 1st of this year. Then we start rebating January, February, March, and so on.
If an individual comes in and buys a sticker
And-
January 1st, they don't have to pay the full rate.
Right, they get a prorated rate.
Right.
And that's
be-
here or
because-
there.
yeah, That's because
Right.
this period ends June
June
30th.
1st.
Correct.
And then we'll go back to 12-month stickers, either curbside or transfer stations, starting July 1st. Part of the confusion here, and they just took it down, but I've had so many discussions about this, and while our signs say April 1st, well, the sign doesn't say April. There's a sign that says new stickers are required by April 1st. That's an acknowledgement of this 3-month grace period. And again, I've studied this extensively. I can find nothing in writing, no policy that was ever passed that said it was a 3-month grace period, but we have honored it. And now,
It's
obviously,
more
they're
for
looking-
somebody who's not a full-time resident who goes over to check on their house in February. We don't force them to buy a full sticker. We give them that grace period till April when they show up.
we have.
Right.
We
So
have.
it's a,
And part of it was an acknowledgement that there weren't a lot of people there during the wintertime. And we're going to go to, quite frankly, we're going to make a recommendation to the council starting next year that we just eliminate the grace periods because you're not doing it over a holiday period. You're not doing it in the winter. You'll be able to buy your stickers in the spring and start in the summer. So, and that's when everybody's here. And we'll have 3 enterprise funds we'll be managing, or 3 waste management programs we'll be running in one community. We'll have one on Prudence, we'll have the Headley Street Transfer Station, we'll have curbside. And I think it's just cleaner and easier that we just make it the same policy for everybody, and we just, when stickers are due, they're due.
you gotta have your new
There's
sticker
no
by July
rebates.
1st.
July 1st.
One of the problems is if everybody knows you have a grace period, the time to purchase goes out to the end of the grace period. That used to be with taxes. Everybody would come in, hey, the 10-day grace period. Like, no, we want your money today.
So I mean, I know that this issue has been, you know, obviously, been going on for a few months. At the last, planning commission meeting, this was presented to me, to come before the council. So I did put it on the agenda. I asked John if he'd be available for the presentation. And I, you know, I think there's been several discussions that have all revolved around, you know, this grace period, and at this point, it's causing us more harm. So, I think, you know, the right approach moving forward is to eliminate the grace period. And was there an oversight, miscommunication? Probably a lot of things, misunderstanding, but it was always revolving around a grace period. The stickers have always been January 1. They've always been a 1-year sticker because that's how they get printed out.
And that's how we calculate the sticker cost too, for sales from January 1. We don't
Right.
do the sticker cost in April.
Right.
You know what
So
I mean?
future sticker costs will be done from July 1st.
July 1st to June 30th.
Okay, so
Thank you.
So really, it was just for tonight, it was a clarification, you know, on the Prudence Island Transfer Station sticker period. It's, you know, on the record here. It's always been January 1. The grace period, I think, is what got us into trouble, so, periods.
I agree with the town administrator on that too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Mr. By apparently there's a huge fire down at East Avenue and off Macquarie, Vanderbilt, and we hope and pray that everybody get out safely and that all the firefighters under construction. Good. Well, hopefully nobody was in there. Flames can be seen across from Tiverton, yeah.
Right.
Let's hope everybody stays safe.
No action needs to be taken. It was clarification and that was discussed that, the sticker period has always been, January 1.
Number 3.
Let's move on to, new business number 3. It's the Narragansett Electric proposes to install 135-3 pole designated as P11-50 Maple Drive for the purpose of supplying electricity.
Yep,
Mr. Woodard?
Council President, members of the council. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna move to approve it.
Thank you.
Second.
I saw you're okay here.
Yeah, I went out and inspected it. We do that every time.
Okay. So, I mean, are there any questions, comments on this item? No? Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you, Mr. Woodhead. All right, next item is correspondence.
Mr. President, I move that all correspondence be received and put on file, placed on file.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next, it's future meetings. Next meeting is October 28th. Then November 12th is going to be our Tuesday meeting at the middle school, followed by November 25th.
And Mr. President, even though it's not open to the public, we should note that we're having a meeting next Monday. Is that the meeting to discuss?
Executive session.
Oh, executive session. That will be scheduled, an executive session on October 21st
7 p.m.
at 7
Move to
p.m.
adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you all.
Flames. Wow. That's from